Thursday night on BBC One, and lots to discuss with Fiona Bruce.
Welcome to Question Time. On tonight's panel, Vicky Atkins, the government's Minister for Safeguarding, previously Minister for Women. Labour's shadow safeguarding minister and MP known for her campaigns on the issue of violence against women, Jess Phillips. Joining us down the line, Kirsten Oswald, recently appointed Deputy Leader of the SNP at Westminster and Chair of the party. Also down the line, until last year, Governor of the Bank of England, currently UN Special Envoy on Climate Action and Finance Advisor to Boris Johnson for this year's COP26 conference in Glasgow, Mark Carney. And journalist and broadcaster, editor of the satirical magazine Private Eye and team captain, of course, on the BBC's Have I Got News for You, Ian Hislop. Good evening. Welcome to my guests here in the studio. Welcome, of course, to Kirsten, who's joining us from East Renfrewshire, to Mark, joining us slightly further away from Ottawa. Very good to see you. And, of course, welcome to our audience, our QT50. Very good to have you back here on the programme again. And welcome to you. Thank you very much for watching. And, of course, if you want to join in the conversation, you know how to do that in the usual way on social media at BBC Question Time. And let's hear what you've got to say as well. OK, we'll take our first question tonight, which is from Tony Cowan.
Good evening, Fiona. Good evening, panel. The question is, have many European countries, including Germany, France, Italy and Spain, taken vaccination nationalism to a new level and, at the same time, endanger the lives of thousands of European citizens by suspending vaccination with the Oxford vaccine?
Of course, now we've had the European Medicines Agency saying categorically that the AstraZeneca vaccine is safe. Vaccine nationalism on the part of the EU, Vicky?
Well, look, we're so pleased that we've been able to deliver the vaccination programme as successfully as we have in the UK. We have 25 million adults who have had their first vaccination. And indeed, the Prime Minister is going tomorrow to have his AstraZeneca vaccination. So if you get the call, please have the jab. In terms of other countries across Europe, we obviously are very much leaving it to them to decide how they roll out the vaccination programme across the EU. We had a clear...
Yes, but what about these comments from Ursula von der Leyen saying that she would take any measures possible in order to try and make sure that the EU has as many vaccines as it needs and possibly stop them going out to the UK?
Yeah, well, we had a clear commitment from the President of the European Union, or the Commission, sorry, earlier in the year to the Prime Minister saying that those measures would not be implemented if contracts were complied with. They are being, and so we very much hope that Europe will get to a place where they are enjoying the sorts of rollout of vaccines that we are.
So when Dominic Raab said this is normally what the UK and EU team up on to reject when other countries with less democratic views than our own engage in that kind of brinkmanship, do you agree with him? That's what they're doing?
I think we don't want to in any way inflame the situation within Europe. They have got to answer to their own populations as to what is happening with the vaccine. We can, I hope, take great pride and thanks in everyone who has helped with the rollout of the programme, the volunteers as well as the professionals. But yeah, we've been clear, there is no place for vaccine nationalism. The Prime Minister has said that, and we are doing our bit.
And that's all said with a wonderfully straight face, which is great. I think the truth is that the EU have embarrassed themselves hideously over this. I mean, van der Leyen had to apologise last time she made this threat. And this is a case of the EU and the actual nations in the EU not agreeing and trying to find someone else to blame. Their rollout has been dismal, and they are looking for someone to blame. And the basic line, particularly from Macron and then from some of the other countries, was, how dare you prevent us getting this vaccine? It doesn't work. Oh, no. Which doesn't make any sense. And that's followed by, how dare you prevent us getting this vaccine? We're going to stop you doing it, which, again, makes no sense at all. And as soon as they listened to their own regulatory body, which is the EMA, said, this, I'm afraid, works perfectly well. The blood clot issue is not an issue. This is perfectly safe. You've got to go on taking it. So it is. And I appreciate for some of the Question Time audience, you know, Remainers like me will have to just suck it up. This is a case where quite obviously the EU has failed, and it's very embarrassing for them.
Jess?
I mean, I have to say, for Remainers like Ian, I also feel quite disappointed. I feel disappointed, you know, at any sort of nationalism, if I'm perfectly honest. I'm not a big fan of vaccine or otherwise.
But do you think if the shoe was on the other foot and we were struggling to get a vaccine, which we're not, I appreciate, and we were struggling to get a vaccine, the EU was going gangbusters, we might do the same?
I like to think, though, in that circumstance, that the EU might have behaved better than I think that they've behaved in this circumstance. I think if we'd been struggling and they'd been going gangbusters, I mean, it's all completely hypothetical, isn't it, because we have to make this situation up, that they would have, I think, actually, the clever thing and the right thing to do would have been like, well, how can we help? And instead, and that's the position that Boris Johnson has got to play, which I have to say is not a natural one for him, to be a sort of natural diplomat, especially with Ursula von der Leyen. But the worst thing about what's happened... Even
Vicky, you're smiling at that.
The worst thing that has happened, I think, is the potential for fear around the vaccine. And that is unforgivable, in my view, actually. And the talk of the blood clot thing, I have to say that I find it absolutely vanishingly astonishing that they would consider, in France especially, a country that apparently has a sort of 30%, 40% uptake in the good times of vaccines, would consider that even slight fakery on this or even any level of nationalism on this was do anything but endanger their own people.
And they've already had to recant, haven't they? I mean, Macron, this again, I mean, this is the second time he's done this. And it's interesting that the EU did not accuse another large country whose rollout is going very well, the United States, who haven't exported them anything. They didn't take them on. The subject of the ire in this case was just Britain, which is indicative and sort of embarrassing for everyone.
Mark.
Well, let me say, from a country that doesn't have any vaccines or any vaccine production and is way behind, first, I'll commend the UK for what they've done. Secondly, I'll just make the observation that it's a very disturbing development on both accounts. First, in terms of the efficacy of the vaccine, it's clear, at least to the Canadian health authorities, that the Oxford-Zeneca vaccine is highly desirable, and we'd love to have some and love to have them injected into arms. Secondly, this development means that if you follow the logic, is all 197 countries are going to have to build up vaccine capacity to deal with the potential of an endemic pandemic, which of course is horrifically bad. And so it needs to be diffused as quickly as possible. And I absolutely share the sentiments on the stage in London.
Kirsten, I'll come to you in a minute. There's just a few hands up, so I'll just hear what our audience has to say. Sam?
Yeah, I completely agree with Jessica. It's been completely irresponsible. Why would you not want to give your country a vaccine that is fighting a horrendous virus? I don't understand it. You're risking people dying, you know, and it's just so irresponsible.
Martin?
Yeah, my mum's involved in the actual vaccination programme, and she said there's been quite a lot of questions now about the safety of the AstraZeneca, and it seems to be causing unnecessary concern amongst the people taking the vaccine, and they're almost waiting for a Pfizer.
Oh. And we mustn't have this, you know, this vaccine is safe and there's no evidence at all that it's linked to these clots, as is alleged overseas. So we've got to really, you know, spread the message far and wide that if you get the call, when you get the call, because we all will do by the end of January, have the jab.
By the end of July.
July, sorry.
January, that would really be going some. That'll be back to the future.
I'm not altering government policy.
Some of us have had the call. It's far too old for this panel.
No, I had mine a couple of days ago. Richard.
Thank you, Fiona. Yeah. We're back to this situation where we've got people talking about things, and in the meantime, people are dying. We're seeing about Italy entering a potential phase 3 of lockdown. We all know how bad and how hurtful that is. We're talking about potentially now 1,000 people a day going to be dying in Italy if it follows the way of the UK. Why on earth are we talking? Why on earth are they? Why on earth are the politicians talking in this way? And let's listen to the science. That's what Boris always says. Let's listen to the science. Let's get back to that. Let's get these injections done. Let's roll it out, because it's people that we're dealing with. It's people that are dying.
So, Kirsten, have many European countries taken vaccine nationalism to a new level and endangered lives at the same time?
It's really difficult, isn't it, to hear that there are these probably quite perplexing to a lot of us statements being made about the safety and efficacy of the vaccine. These vaccines are safe. I can't wait till I get the call, the blue envelope on the mat to tell me that it's my turn to go and be vaccinated. And I think the other thing to remember in all of this is that we're not in a race against one another. I say that from a position here in Scotland where we're doing a great job with the vaccine rollout. Everybody's working so hard to do that. But the race is actually against the virus. It's a race between us and COVID, and the vaccine is our road out of this. We're not safe from this pandemic until all of us have had the vaccine, whether we're here, whether we're further afield. So we need to find ways to have sensible discussions and sensible dialogue about this so that all of us can be safer.
And I notice you've got an EU flag behind you there, Kirsten. I mean, the SNP obviously wishes very much to remain as part of the EU. Are you quite glad, as it's turned out, that you've not ended up in Team Ursula?
I would really sincerely like to be in the EU. As you can imagine, there are so many reasons why
even with the vaccine rollout,
that would make lives better for people in my constituency. But that it's an entirely separate issue to the fantastic job that the NHS in Scotland have done in rolling out the vaccines. And I know that that's the same for people across the border in England too. So, I think that it's a sore thing for us not to be within the EU, but I am absolutely delighted with the way that the rollout is going here.
Kirsten, while I've got you on a separate matter, but this is a story that has just broken this evening, so it would be remiss not to ask you. There are reports out tonight that Nicola Sturgeon misled Parliament about her involvement in the Scottish Government's mishandling of the allegations of sexual assault against Alex Salmond. Does Nicola Sturgeon now have to resign?
I don't think that that's the case. We don't even have the report from the committee yet. So, as we've seen,
this is what we're hearing from the committee.
But the committee has not yet published its report, and of course, the issue of the ministerial code is something that James Hamilton is examining, and we don't have his report either. So this committee has unfortunately experienced an awful lot of leaking and information coming out in ways that are neither helpful nor necessarily accurate. I think that this is more of the challenge that we see again here, and I'll be waiting to hear from the actual report and to hear from James Hamilton.
So you're waiting to hear from James Hamilton. Does the result of this committee not matter then?
This committee has had a great deal to say, and Nicola Sturgeon, of course, sat in front of that committee for 8 solid hours, giving evidence in substantial and significant detail, and I know that she stands by the evidence that she's given. I think that it would, I have to reflect, be inconceivable to me to imagine Boris Johnson sitting in front of a committee for 8 hours. I just cannot foresee that ever happening. So I think that
do we have to change the subject? Can we get back to Nicola Sturgeon?
Has been involved in every way in trying to make sure that she provides clarity to the committee. I think that's very welcome, and I'm delighted that she did that.
But why are we talking about Boris?
Exactly.
I'm sorry, Ian, I didn't entirely hear you, but I think you said, why are we talking about Boris?
Yeah.
And I think it's difficult to imagine Boris Johnson putting himself into a position where he's being scrutinised for 8 hours.
Well, he hasn't lost £500,000 of public money and given it to Alex Salmond, has he?
But can I say something
I think that Boris Johnson has probably done a number of things which could usefully be scrutinised. And
I know, but can we never talk about Scotland? Does it always have to be referred back down here? You said Nicola Sturgeon.
I'm delighted to talk about Scotland, and we'll do so at every and any opportunity. I'm delighted to talk about Nicola Sturgeon too. She's an excellent leader of the SNP, and I'm delighted with the way that she has led us through this COVID pandemic.
Can I say something about the defence of Nicola Sturgeon sitting for 8 hours? I read quite a lot about Nicola Sturgeon giving her evidence and Alex Salmond. And the way that it has been spun by, I presume, the Scottish National Party machine, it's as if they were at a gig, as if they were like, oh, didn't she do well? She performed really well. It was not a gig. It was an inquiry into the sexual abuse of many women. I don't care how well Nicola Sturgeon did in it. What I care about is that I'm not sure that women in Scotland, certainly women working in politics in Scotland, and you could say this for all the UK if you want to kick it down to us as well, I'll join in with you. But the reality is that How could anyone feel safe that they weren't going to be politicked over, their body, their experiences weren't going to be politicked over, and then everybody was going to like kiss their guns because Nicola Sturgeon did well at the inquiry? At best, Nicola Sturgeon was unprofessional with those women's lives. At worst, she misled Parliament.
Well, and let's just reiterate again. Let's just reiterate it. Obviously, Alex Salmond was cleared of the allegations.
Reality at all. And I think that Jess actually talking about the women is the absolutely key thing. That's why all of this matters. That's why it was important that
the thing you said was that she did a good job at the inquiry.
Okay, I'm going to move on because we've got a number of questions. It's just this came up this evening, so I wanted to put that to you, Kirsten. I also need to just let you know that next week we're going to be in Cardiff. And so we're looking for people there who live there or thereabouts to come and be part of the audience. So if you'd like to have your say, and of course, elections are coming up for the Senate soon after Easter, so do apply by going to the website and filling in the form there, and we'd love to hear from you. So that's Cardiff next week. OK, sort of staying on a sort of similar subject, let's have a question now from Colette.
Good evening. Thank you, Fiona. Thank you, panel. Since the tragic death of Sarah Everard, are the government doing enough to protect women?
Now, Colette, I think I'm right that you don't mind me asking this question, because I checked this beforehand, but you yourself have experienced some very serious sexual violence at the hands of men.
Yes, I have. And it's fair to say, you know, this is why I'm asking, are the government doing enough? You know, it's hard to obviously speak about this, but at the same time, I think it's really important that we all actually have a voice. You know, I'm a mother as well. I've got a 25-year-old daughter. And my experience was very much that I wasn't the victim. I was the person on trial. Yep. This isn't right.
And what is it that happened to you, Colette, if you're happy to share that with us?
Yeah, right. So what happened to me was, okay, so I had somebody attack me in broad daylight. I was in my car. They managed to get into my car, kind of, with a knife. I actually managed to get away from this person and use my car to do it. Then I faced possible arrest for using unreasonable force. It then transpires that this person is now actually serving, you know, kind of 5 life sentences for murder and rape.
Wow.
But I wasn't taken seriously. And if I actually was listened to, there's 2 people who might be still alive.
Well, Colette, listen, thank you for sharing that with us, because that must be an incredibly difficult and painful memory. And thank goodness you're here to tell the tale. Are the government doing enough to protect women? Jess Phillips.
I mean, the answer is no, I'm afraid to say. The government isn't doing enough to protect women. And I'm not going to say that the government isn't doing anything to protect women. They are. But it's never anybody's complete and utter political motivation that it's going to take to properly address violence against women and girls in this country. You can't just get together in a meeting one week in Westminster, which is what happened this week, and come up with some random suggestions that literally nobody asked for. You can't take 2 years to do a rape review. In that time, according to ONS figures that came out today, 1.4 million people will have been sexually assaulted since the government started doing its rape review. And what we know is that 1.5%, so 98.5% of all rapes in this country go without any charge or conviction. How is that acceptable? And I'm afraid to say, I speak to people like Colette all the time. I speak to victims of domestic violence, victims of sexual violence, and they all say the same thing, is that nobody listens to me. I felt like a piece of evidence. There was nothing in the system that was about me. And so, you know, that's one of the reasons that the Labour Party this week set out what should be happening for rape victims to try and improve this, while the government waits 2 years to tell us about a review that it's too late for the 1.4 million people who've been sexually assaulted since they started it. They're not doing enough for women in lots and lots of categories, and I'm afraid domestic violence, sexual violence and sexual exploitation is just another one of them.
Vicky.
Colette, thank you for sharing your story. The courage you have shown in sharing your story tonight is extraordinary. it is women sharing their stories that we have seen over the last week that has been one of the most upsetting, but also, I think, one of the most inspiring things to come out of the terrible events of last week.
But presumably their stories weren't surprising to you.
Well, we are, if I sort of develop, because what we have done, because we know that women are sharing their stories, we have reopened a survey that we are running into to develop our new strategy on tackling violence against women and girls. We reopened it on Friday, and as of tonight, 140,000 women have responded. That shows the level of interest, but also the level of experience that we have. Now, in terms of what the government is doing, look, I don't think we can ever do enough to tackle violence against women and girls, but this is what we're doing in the short term. We have got the domestic abuse bill currently going through the House of Lords. It's about to be passed into law, and that's significant because it's a landmark piece of legislation that will help up to 2.3 million victims of domestic abuse each year. And we know that for women and girls, they're most at risk in their own homes or with ex-partners. So that's why the domestic abuse bill is so significant. In addition, we want to look at all other forms of violence against women and girls, which is why we're running this survey and why we're forming this strategy later on in the year to deal with rape, to deal with stalking, to deal with, if I may, to deal with all forms of violence against women and girls.
Victoria,
this is going to be a national strategy to draw together at national and local level what we can do to help women. And finally, if I may just deal with this point that Jess has made, we know that the rates of conviction and prosecution in rapes are terrible. They are far, far, far too low. And so we have done a review of the entire criminal justice system to see where the pressure points are. And we
tell you where they are.
We know, for example,
we all know.
We know, for example, that rape victims do not like, understandably, giving their mobile phones to the police to be searched as part of the investigation. And so in the police bill this week, we are setting out the legal framework so that victims have certainty as to what they can expect from the police, and the police know when they should or shouldn't be asking for this. That was in the police bill this week. Jess sadly voted against it. But this is part of our ongoing programme of work. But look, I will not sit here and say to you, yeah, we've done everything. Of course not. This is absolutely a programme of work that we must all unite in working together, because the only way we're going to solve this is across society, working with Jess, working with men. That's how we're going to solve this.
But the reality is that when we talk about the strategy that you're going to launch next year, I mean, it's the delayed violence against women and girls strategy that should have actually already been renewed. The government are currently trying to take domestic violence out of the violence against women and girls strategy, much against the word of the sector. They're saying this is, fundamental that we keep it within that section. And also, when we started the domestic abuse bill 4 years ago, when I was working on it back then, before Victoria was the minister involved in it, the sector, victims, everybody said that what we wanted was a violence against women and girls bill, and the government said no. And so now the government is saying, we need to look at violence against women and girls in the round, and we're going to do another survey, and we're going to ask some more questions, and this is really important, and isn't it about culture? But I could tell you 10 things. I could have told you 10 things 4 years ago that would have improved it, and people have been saying it again and again and again. And yes, the light is on us at the moment because of this case, and we should take advantage of it, and I will make sure that all these women coming forward, that there is an advantage in their voices. But the reality is that by next week it will be on to something else, and the government will do a review, and it probably will lead to some tinkering around the edges.
That's not correct. Well, tell you what, let's hear some more from our audience, because there's a lot of hands up, so I want to try and hear from you. Andrea.
Thanks, Fiona. I don't think the issue here is about, if you have had to report something to the police, what can you and cannot expect? Will your phone be taken, will it not? I think the issue here is, ultimately, women need to know that they will be taken seriously.
Yeah. Exactly.
Whether it's domestic violence or if it's an attack on the street, they don't need to know what's going to be expected of them. They just need to know that they're going to be taken seriously, and the correct questions are going to be asked to lead to a conviction, so that we're not left in a situation where 1.5% of, you know, attacks leads to a criminal conviction. That's just too low, and they just need to be taken seriously.
But they're not.
And I just want to hear a bit more from our audience, because that's what they're here for. Josh.
I find it really disappointing to have sat here for quite a while now and listened to a Tory MP implore women to come forward and give more evidence and hand their phones over. I'm not sure if I'm the only one who's been on social media this week, but trending all week long is not all men. That's one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen on social media. The point here is not about women coming forward. It's about us doing more to stop men doing this.
Oh, God
Boys
bless
and
you.
men need to do more.
Vanessa, I can see you applauding to that.
I absolutely agree. I think prevention is better than cure. We need to start talking to our young men about consent, whether we do that during our sex educational classes at school, at university, but we need to teach men that it's not okay to do this. The blame has been on women for far too long, and we actually need to start looking at people who are responsible for crimes like this.
Dana?
Thank you, Fiona. So the way to take fear off the streets with women is to create a fear of offence. So the fear has to be bigger for those who commit the offence than the fear that women have on the street. The Crown Prosecution Service today got a High Court decision which also went against this. So I think the earlier statement about the way justice is administered, not only creating laws, but the way justice is administered really needs to be overhauled. I think that's where problems really lie.
That is important, the way that justice is administered, because we've got 50% fewer courts than we had 10 years ago. We've got 20,000 fewer police officers. There is a consideration, and also the statistics have been getting worse. It's always been bad, don't get me wrong. This has never been good, but it's been getting worse. Conviction rates are getting worse.
Let me bring in the rest of the panel. Ian.
Yeah, well, again, this is incredibly depressing to think that not only is the situation, as you say, getting worse, but it seems to have been worse than I can remember in my life. Not the failures of the justice system, which are fairly consistent throughout, or the underfunding of places like women's refuges, which are always saying, well, you could have given us the money last year and you failed again and this didn't happen. I just do think that one of the lessons of the pandemic, which I hope we're all going to take out of it, is when anyone in power says, I'm afraid we can't do that, it's not practical, we will never listen to that again.
Yeah, too.
It is practical if you want to do it. No, never again do we have to have people saying, well, I'm afraid that's very expensive, £300, that's very expensive. No, it isn't. You've got 37 billion to throw down the toilet on test and trace. I think the one thing we can do, and I'm not suggesting that it's a huge amount of effort in this, is just to say those answers aren't good enough.
Yeah.
If you aren't doing enough, do more. Don't just say this isn't possible, this isn't practical.
Well, Ian,
sorry, no, I mean, just some of the solutions people have come up with, they say, well, we don't want a quick fix, we want long-term and we want education. Why can't we have both? Let's have long-term and education, and if more CCTV, more guards on public transport, night buses, conductors, more police on the streets, all of these things, they may be quick fixes, but why can't we have all that as well?
Yep. Okay, Vicky, I'll come back to you. I just want to hear from the rest of the panel. Kirsten.
Yeah, I think, you know, that there's actually a number of things that we should be doing and that we should be looking at. Ian is right, that this isn't a situation where only one course of action is necessary. And that's because every single woman, I'm sure, on your panel and all the women watching will be so able to relate to the different emotions and issues which have been discussed. Your panellist was very brave to talk about her own experience. Far too many women have that kind of experience, and there's been far too little attention paid to these kind of situations in the past. I think that it has to be about making this a moment where we decide that these are not niche issues, these are not women's issues, this is not something that we only look at through that particular lens. This actually is an issue that should concern all of us. Every single one of us should be concerned by what we've heard over recent weeks, and it is the job of all politicians to make difficult and brave decisions and make choices to make sure that we do get beyond some of these challenges I know that Jess talked about issues within the justice system, and I think that these are real issues. They're real and significant issues, and not only are women put off from coming forward, but then when they do come forward, they're potentially left with a huge weight. I know that we have been doing better in Scotland in terms both of cases coming forward and convictions, but that has to be a constant job of work, and we will, I'm sure, always want to continue to improve that. It has to be a really big holistic approach to making sure that when we wring our hands and say this can't go on, that actually we're committing to taking action so that it really doesn't go on.
Mark?
Yeah, exceptionally difficult issue and difficult conversation has to be grasped on all levels. And I think you start from a position of seeing it from the perspective of Colette and others, both the system, so question of system capacity. There is evidence of some systemic misogyny in some institutions, and I think you have to run that to the ground on that.
Did you ever think that was the case at the Bank of England, just out of interest?
There was definitely yes, that's the short answer. I'll give you a short answer to that. Bred over centuries and a number. Look, I will say this: I'm proud of the increased gender diversity and diversity at the Bank of England. But equally, if I were starting there today, I would want to substantially improve the gender diversity and diversity of the Bank of England. And I think that's a basic point I want to make, which is that even if things are improving, there's so far to go. But if I can finish on one thing which came out of the discussion, which there are capacity issues and there are issues the government need to do, but it's also, and this applies to Canada, I'm not pointing to the United Kingdom, it is also a social and cultural issue, and it is a male issue. And it is not just the bad men, but the good men. And it is a broader, we have to, unfortunately, it's unfortunate these horrible events have to happen, both the murder and the police response, but we have to use them as a way to break out of this mode and have the broader conversation. It doesn't get solved overnight, but we can't shy away from it. And it's just to reinforce it, huge amount that needs to be done on the institutional side. But if we only go there and only rely on deterrence, then we won't fully succeed.
Okay. Well, Colette, let me come back to you because you started us off on this. What do you think of what you've heard?
I think a couple of things. I think it's okay saying, I really take offence by making it an issue about handing over your mobile phone. I'd like to say to anybody who did that, because the thing is, I got questioned about what clothes I was wearing if I provoked the person to attack me. This is disgusting. I think the basic problem is...
Colette, let me just make sure I've understood that right. So you were in your own car.
Yes.
A man forced his way in with a knife, and you were asked what clothes you were wearing.
Yes.
By the police.
I asked what clothes I was wearing because he walked past me before I got in my car. He was watching me. Okay? So I was asked if my skirt was below my knee or above my knee and if I provoked him in any way. Okay? Now, my key thing is here, if I can say, the problem is I'm nearly 50 years old, okay? I've been around for 50 years. So the thing is, there's no deterrent. Where's the deterrent? Where's the deterrent? Say, if you attack somebody and take their life, or you rape a woman. And the other thing is as well, can I just make this very clear? It's not just women that are attacked and raped, it's men too. There's no deterrent at all. We are too soft. Our justice system is an absolute tragedy. People get away with, frankly, murder. And how many more women and children and men have got to suffer, like me and many others, in order to make somebody wake up and listen? They're going to take somebody a quite high profile, somebody's daughter from a quite high profile society name or a politician's daughter to make this happen. Because my problem is, I don't think our justice system works in any way.
I mean, that's what it comes down to, doesn't it, Vicky? It comes down to a number of things, but as Colette is saying, if a man... I mean, Vera Bird, the Victims Commission, says rape has effectively become decriminalised because as we've heard, the conviction rate is so vanishingly low that men feel they can get away with it.
Yeah, so Colette, please can I apologise? I didn't in any way want to reduce your experience to a conversation about mobile phones. I was giving it by way of an example of a barrier that some rape victims feel when they are going through the criminal justice system. And I'm trying to give reassurance that we're dealing with that to other victims for whom that may be a barrier. But in terms of your own experience, clearly those questions were wholly wrong. And with the rate review, we've been going through the entire process to see what's going wrong. The reason it's taken 2 years, and I think Jess knows this, is because we've wanted to include views from the women's sector, and they produced a report just before Christmas. We're looking at that. We want to include that in our report. And there was a judicial review just this week on the CPS charging decisions. It's taken time, and I appreciate that is very difficult for victims. But what we want is a justice system that works for victims. And we know that police training and CPS training is very much part of that.
Can I just say,
very briefly, Jess, because then I need to move on.
Be in a meeting in 10 years' time, and I was in one 10 years ago where we talked about police training. Something has got to actually change.
Something's gone wrong, hasn't it?
No, but the thing is there are things
that's
like
not right.
So what could happen with Colette is that at the moment she reported, she could be given a lawyer, because at the moment she would just be considered evidence in the case. So the Labour Party is suggesting that all rape victims be given a legal advocate to improve the CPS throughout the process. Would the Minister agree that that is a good idea, so that Colette wasn't left feeling like evidence?
Jess, we're doing better than that. On Monday, we announced a further £11 million for independent sexual violence advisors to support the victims of rape.
Can I just say, I was an independent sexual violence advisor, and that is not the same as a legal advocate, as the Minister knows.
Very briefly, then, because I do need to move on to other subjects.
I'd really like us to be able not to do this party political thing and to talk about it as we were able to through the domestic abuse bill. But I think we've got to work together to sort this out.
I'm really cross, and it's not because of your political party, it's because of experiences like Colette's. So I apologise if that
try
comes across.
To work together to deal with this. We've made such huge changes with the
I'm going to stop you both simply because I'm going to stop you both.
To the Prime Minister, he's yet to call.
You and I are meeting next week, Jess.
Vicky and Jess, I'm going to stop you both, not because this is not incredibly important, because it is. But there are also other questions that people want to ask, and I need to make sure I get to them. So let's take a question from Josh Noble.
After the government's recent defence review announced that our nuclear stockpile will rise by 40%, yay, are the government now confident that we could repel a cyber or chemical attack by killing millions of innocent people?
Kirsten.
Yeah, that's, I think, a very well put question. Obviously, it is absolutely terrifying to think that the UK government has suddenly, for the first time since the Cold War, decided to increase the number of warheads that it holds. And, you know, these are weapons of mass destruction. These are weapons that are designed to wipe millions of people off the face of the planet. I find it completely incomprehensible, actually. I can't begin to imagine what possible benefit they think that they're going to gain from that. It is not a useful deterrent against any of the threats that we face either now or are likely to face in the future. And I have to say, as someone who lives in the west of Scotland, to know that these weapons of mass destruction are sitting a stone's throw from my door, a stone's throw from where my children go to school, that really does fill me with alarm. And it's something that is of grave concern to people living in this area. There's no place for these weapons here. And this is something that people in Scotland feel very strongly about. We would dearly like to see these nuclear weapons moved away from the Clyde. We don't want them in Scotland. It's one of the things that cause people to make that different choice about whether Scotland should be independent or not. And there's no wonder that people see a better way without weapons of mass destruction in our back door.
I mean, the SNP obviously wants to be independent, but you also want to be part of the NATO alliance, and that is a nuclear alliance.
And plenty of NATO countries don't have nuclear weapons. And I think that the point about this increase being the first since the Cold War is actually really important. You know, I do wonder what other countries will think about this. It's going in absolutely the opposite direction to the one we should. It's not allowing the UK government to even pretend, I think, to uphold its international obligations. I don't understand why they're doing that. I would also question their use of money, I have to say, because when we're looking at the difficult choices that we all face coming out of COVID, to waste inordinate and unfathomable unfathomable sums of money on weapons of mass destruction that they say they're not going to use, and I hope they're not, then I really sincerely wonder what on earth these decision-making processes were.
Mark?
Well, I think Josh framed it very well, the issue in terms of what are we trying to protect against with this. And you think about what flows across our borders and hits the economy. We've just lived with the pandemic. We had a discussion earlier about the need for domestic capacity. Unfortunately, in a world of vaccine nationalism or down that road, domestic capacity to produce, that's in health. In cyber, you need domestic capacity, you need domestic resilience, you need to plan for failure, you need to plan for a successful cyber attack, so that and have backup systems and contingency plans so that the economy can continue to function. That's how you have credible deterrence in cyber, not, as Josh was challenging, which is that you would respond with nuclear. And in financial, the bit I know the best, of course, in the financial sector, you have a strong financial sector domestically to absorb shocks from abroad. So we absolutely, whether it's the UK, Canada, elsewhere, you need to build up domestic resilience, but concentrate that resilience in there as opposed to in other areas.
Sean, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I'd just like to ask the SMP minister, what would her position be then if we got intelligence that someone was about to nuclear bomb us, if she's not in favour of us expanding our weapon defence? Would her idea of defending us be to simply sit there and do nothing, perhaps?
What if she found out that someone was literally about to launch a nuclear attack?
Yeah. If she's not, from what I gather, she seems to be not in favour of us expanding our nuclear weapon defence.
Okay, well, go on, Kirsten. Just give us a quick answer to that, then.
Sorry.
Okay, well, I mean, if someone was going to attack us with nuclear weapons, and I've no reason to expect that they're going to do that, unfortunately, us attacking them back with nuclear weapons would only result in the annihilation of millions more people. There is no good outcome. There's no positive outcome for people with nuclear weapons. This is something that countries across the world should not have. This is not something we should be growing.
Tony, I'll come back to you in, sorry, just 1 second. Tony?
Yes, let's not forget, Fiona and panel, it's a nuclear deterrent. And the nuclear deterrent, which we've had for many years, clearly has worked because we've never been subject to a nuclear conflict whilst we've had the capacity to retaliate. And therefore, it could be argued that the nuclear deterrent is doing its job and will continue to do its job in the future. But it has to be updated. And I think that the majority would agree that it would be foolish to give up our nuclear capability while other countries, which perhaps bear us ill will, do themselves have nuclear weapons.
Ian?
I think it's a very strange time to be increasing our stock of nuclear warheads. Even if you accept the argument that we need a nuclear deterrent, Trident and the replacement submarines are that deterrent. Why do we need more warheads? It's a very strange argument. And around the globe, when we're saying to places like Iran, you don't need a nuclear weapon, they're presumably going to say, well, you're increasing the number of yours. But why are you doing that? And may I just say that in terms of the cost, the Ministry of Defence, as I'm sure Mark Carney knows, is the biggest black hole in British public spending. There is no particular confidence from where any of us are sitting that the many, many billions of pounds spent on aircraft carriers that don't have planes on or might eventually appear 10 years after the rest of the world doesn't even have an aircraft carrier capacity left. The actual Ministry of Defence has been calamitous in terms of wasting money. So there was a review. Is there any other alternative apart from these submarines that go around the world and spend a lot of time in the dock? Anyone who's followed this recently, they do spend quite a lot of time being repaired. These are the ones that we've extended the life of before we actually replace them with another unbelievably expensive and complex one. I mean, the review, this was meant to be a comprehensive defence review, and it was a terrible hodgepodge. No one made any sense at all. The Prime Minister was asked, why do you need more warheads in order to respond to a cyber attack? Really? Well, you need more of them? You need them? It made no sense at all. And in terms of identifying where the threat came from, the whole review seemed to be pointing the finger at anyone but the most obvious country, which is China. Literally, there's no point in doing this stuff if you're not going to make it coherent. And I didn't think the argument at any stage in any of this made any sense.
Dale.
Oh, hi there. Yeah, we do need a deterrent to stand up for the likes of Russia, North Korea. So I do think we do need something to protect us in this country, and obviously where we are, our global stage. So it is a lot of money. But
and you're happy that the stockpile is going to be increased by 40%? That's what's at issue here.
Yeah, I mean, personally for me, if I was in that position, yes, I probably would. I probably would up it by 40%. And obviously, as well, with the armed forces, and make that, obviously, because our tanks are outdated and our armed forces seem to be outdated as well. So I would put that alongside.
OK. Brian.
Thank you, Fiona. As Ian has said, a couple of points, as Ian has said so eloquently, firstly, having a 40% increase in nuclear warheads seems such an ineffective form of defense in a world where we're facing growing cybersecurity threats. It doesn't seem to be a very effective solution. And secondly, the one thing which we've heard consistently over the 10 or 12 years where we've had a Conservative government in power is how the fiscal budget is very tight and has to be managed. So I don't know how they can justify such a long period of austerity and cuts and then simultaneously increase nuclear spending and spending on wars by 40% at a time when we've been going through such a difficult and testing time as a country. This doesn't make sense to me.
In that very announcement, they said that the foreign aid budget might be restored back to 0.7% from 0.5%, because someone had argued, well, soft power does work a bit, and if Britain is seen to be more generous abroad, then perhaps it will help to defuse some of the threats. But the rider was added, this 0.7% will be restored when the fiscal situation allows. This doesn't apply to any other form of expenditure on any single front. Yeah. When is the fiscal situation going to be right? Either do it or don't do it.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that the problem is that it wasn't very comprehensive, and the why they're, you know, decades and, well, longer than decades, centuries of non-proliferation, it seems that why would we suddenly start to be ramping up nuclear warheads at this moment?
So what would the Labour position be? Would it be to maintain it? Would it be to reduce it? I mean,
but maintain it, and also absolutely to maintain it. But the reality is the why. Nobody can answer the why here, and maybe the minister can help us out. But why are they saying they're going to? And it's not been properly explained to Parliament. It's not been debated in Parliament. It's not been properly explained yesterday. One day to end generations of non-proliferation, get my teeth in. But the thing is that the armed forces, for example, is the smallest it's been in 300 years. So the why they're spending on that and not on this is just inexplicable to me.
So I'm very conscious, I think I'm probably the only Member of Parliament here who I have my constituents who work at RAF Coningsby are at the forefront of defending our country. They have the rapid response unit that goes up into the sky in the typhoons at 7 minutes' notice if there is incursions into our airspace. So I feel, you know, that the responsibility that the military wears very, very keenly, because I have the pleasure of representing people who are absolutely defending our country. It is the first duty of government to protect the nation. That we say it often, but my goodness me, this is the context in which it really is relevant. And this review, Kirsten, if I may, this review was comprehensive. It dealt with, although nuclear warheads have been raised, it dealt with the enormous threats that we face in terms of cyber activity, hostile states and so on.
And so the question from Josh is whether or not threatening... Sorry, Kirsten. The question from Josh the original question is whether or not responding to a cyber attack with a nuclear attack is a realistic proposition.
So there are different threats that require different solutions.
But this is one of the ones that could was cited as could be could be suitable for a nuclear response.
In terms of the cyber threat, we are also establishing the National Cyber Force, and these people will be working to keep our nation safe, not in all sorts of regards that we probably won't hear about, because by definition so much of their work is done in secret. But there are many, many threats that we are facing internationally. And so this is a review that has been absolutely methodical.
I hope it's not
so let's let Vicky answer.
We don't get told about it.
Well, no. Of course, as you know, Ian, the work of the agencies is reviewed by the Security and Intelligence Committee in Parliament. But there are elements that we cannot talk about publicly, and we never have been able to.
But not the amount of it, and the fact that you're going to do it, and the fact that.
Let's let Kirsten in. Yes.
Thank you. So a couple of things. One, as part of this review, there is the notion now that we won't be able to talk about things because there will be information that is no longer made available, which was previously made available. So I'm sure that Ian is absolutely right in what he says there. But the other thing is that Vicky has absolutely failed to explain why it would be a sensible idea to increase the number of nuclear warheads by 40%. And she's failed to explain what possible threat that is protecting us from. And I think that, that these are really important questions, as well as the outrageous cost. There is the moral issue that concerns many people, and on none of these fronts have we had answers.
Forgive me, I haven't answered the point about cyber warfare. And as I say, this is the next front that we are already facing in many regards. In terms of the nuclear warheads, it is part of this very, very large comprehensive review. And it comes back to the principle that we cannot allow our adversaries to have more might, if you like, than we do in this regard. And so it is very much that deterrent factor that members of the audience have already talked about that has served us so well over previous decades, and indeed is the foundation of NATO, the founding principle of NATO.
OK, we've got only a few minutes left, and I wanted to get in one more question, which is from Andrea McSherry.
Thanks, Fiona. Is £2.6 million a reasonable amount of money to spend on decorating the Downing Street briefing room?
Ian?
No, obviously it's a ridiculous amount of money, and it shows this government's skills with procurement once again. 2.6 million for a couple of microphones, brilliant. I mean, no wonder Test and Trace cost 37 billion. It's absolutely fatuous, and the idea that the Prime Minister can't even have a room to make speeches, to talk about things, unless it's subsidised by some sort of Russian company with links to RT and... I mean, it just beggars belief. It's the idea that he can't buy a sofa for less than £250,000 from a designer. Literally, it's a metaphor for an entire year of COVID incompetence. And I mean, you are meant to be politicians, but the sheer tin ear of saying in a week when the nurses are getting 1%, I think I need a big room with some microphones in it. And then I can go and announce to people, what? I don't know. We've had a whole year of briefings. It's fine. I like the slides.
You like the graphics.
I mean, forget the spokesperson. I'm sorry. It's like just a minute. I'm going to go on talking till the programme...
No, definitely don't do that, Ian. Stop now. Actually, I'll tell you what it's making me wonder is how much this set costs. Actually, I must find out. I suspect it won't be anything like that. Come on, Vicky. I mean, £2.6 million. You can buy... I was having a quick look on... Brev's website. You can get 10 four-bedroom houses in your constituency in Louth for that.
Look, I'm not a building expert, nor am I an interior designer. I do not know what that money was spent on. I haven't seen the plans. I don't know, for example, whether there were structural alterations. These are...
2.6 million.
I don't know. I'm saying...
I had structural alterations on my house recently. It was about, it wasn't 2.6 million.
Well, you probably don't live in a Grade 1 listed building.
Perhaps
you do. I don't know. Perhaps you do. But
Does it sound reasonable to you? That's the question.
I think what we're trying to do with the broadcast when they happen is to open up politics to the public. We're trying to be more transparent, trying to be more...
By having a spokesperson instead of the Prime Minister answering the questions? That's less transparent.
Trying to answer questions from across the press. You will know better than I that there are questions about the lobby and whether other members of the press should be involved. We want to open this right up to be transparent, to have those conversations and to help explain government policy. That's the thinking behind it.
Mark, I could see you having a bit of a chuckle there, not at what Vicky was saying, I hasten to add, but certainly at Ian.
I missed this story, so I take
well, that's kind of all you need to know, really. I mean, that's the discussion.
I think the amounts of money are just too small.
There we go, Mark. Let's hear what you got to say. So, yes, it's I mean, I don't know what you spent at the Bank of England, but it's 2.6. You know all about money. Come on, £2.6 million for a Downing Street briefing.
We retained the briefing room that was put in place when the bank gained its independence in 1997. That's what I recall. Still works.
Okay, Kirsten.
Yeah, this is extraordinary, isn't it? And I've seen a picture of the briefing room, and it definitely doesn't look like a room that amount of money was spent on. But I think that what Vicky was saying is important. She said that this was necessary for reasons of transparency. That's plainly not true. You know, there's absolutely no reason that Boris Johnson couldn't come out, as Nicola Sturgeon does, every single day and tell the population what the updates are. She manages to do that without this kind of particularly fancy room that he seems to have spent all this money on. But it is a serious issue, all about choices. And, you know, whether it's on Trident or whether it's this briefing room, which must have gold encrusted chairs or something, the choices that this Tory government are making are not the right choices for people in our communities. They're not the right choices for people in Scotland. And I'm very sure that people in Scotland will make their views plain in our elections in May. There are different choices that would do our population much better.
Sherry. Actually, you must have spent a bit of money on that dragon behind you, Sherry, that we can see in your sitting room.
2.6 million on that.
Yeah, believe it or not, someone gave me that.
Was it a Russian businessman?
We have all these TV programs where people swap places to experience how the other half lives. Maybe we should have one where the MPs swap place with a normal person so they can see how much we spend when we redecorate our house.
I'm sure you're not thinking of Wife Swap, because that certainly was a programme where people... I'm sure you don't mean that, Sherry. Jo.
I'll come and live with you, Sherry.
Jo.
Hi, I just think this is absolutely ludicrous. 2.6 million for a television, what is a television studio? If it isn't broke, don't fix it. It's an absolute and utter insult to the NHS. It's an insult to every single person in this country that uses a TV or is using Zoom. There is absolutely no excuse for it. And as for spending 40 million on buying more nuclear warheads, just
well, we don't know. We don't know if it's 40 million. It's increasing it by 40%. I suspect it's a bit more than 40 million. Anyway.
40 million and the rest.
I think that might be a bit of a bargain, Jo.
If it was 40 million, the MOD will turn out to 400.
Look, I mean, I totally agree with Ian. It's just another example of terrible, terrible choices that have been made. And again, next time I'm told that you can't have something for women in refuges, or you can't have this, I'm going to say I'll take it from that 2.6 million. Within the corner there was a Henry Hoover, which was the only well-procured thing I think I saw in the entire set. Because it is a good Hoover. But
I'm sure other Hoovers are available. We have to say that on the BBC.
But it's cheap and it works. But the reality is that it's not transparency. It's going to be a spokesperson. It's not going to be Boris Johnson. It's going to be a spokesperson, and it's going to be a party political broadcast. I don't feel like it's going to be any more transparency, or the public are going to feel like politicians are telling them the truth.
And the idea that we want to emulate Scotland and have it every single day, God, can we not?
Okay.
It's great. It's really, really helpful.
Okay,
People value the opportunity to hear every day what the update is.
Okay,
but
Kirsten.
it's obviously not
we hear what you've got to
watch.
say. Thank you. I'm afraid I'm going to stop because our time is up. We've come to the end of our hour. Thank you very much to the panel for coming along tonight. Kirsten and Mark, thank you very much for joining us from your respective locations. To our audience, thank you, of course, for being part of this evening. And to you at home, thank you very much for watching. From Question Time, bye-bye.
This week, the Prime Minister's former aide, Dominic